the bearish sentiments persisted in the equities market, putting the all-share index year-to-date returns to around 17%. And I have Dari Fajimolu, the head of research and strategy at NASD PLC, to discuss activities in the markets. Thank you so much for your time, Dari. And let's first start with the equities market on the NGX and find out what's driving sentiments today.
Thanks again for having me, Kenneth. So essentially what we're seeing is investors' apathy to equities market, which is broadly expected because for different reasons, both at the global level and the domestic level. So we have Nigeria, and the global economy is just coming out of, is yet to fully recover from the COVID-induced slowdown. And then, of course, a couple of other challenges are coming up in the commodity space, in the global inflation and the rest. So Nigeria is also part of, that's also part of what is reflecting in the equities market in Nigeria. The primary, another side to it, that may be peculiar to Nigeria, is the coming elections. So once the elections are around the corner, investors tend to be very cautious and so taking it very slowly. And of course, in terms of inflation, Nigeria's inflation has been up significantly, about more than 18% present in inflation as of June. So these are factors driving investors, the cautious position that we're seeing in the equities market.
Are we seeing those same sentiments reflect in the unlisted securities area? And can you take us through what we've seen play out in the first half of the year for that segment of the market?
Certainly. In terms of on the NASD's index, it increased actually on a quarter-on-quarter basis for the second quarter. But in terms of transactions, we also observed the same slowdown in terms of volumes and value of transactions. So that's also is experienced broadly in the equities markets broadly, whether on the NASD or the NGX. That's a broad, that's a common factor that we're seeing. And of course, the fact that the increase in the MPR also, investors also are taking a position whereby, because as it is, the MPR, increase in MPR means that the bond market is going to be more attractive than the equities market. But that does not mean that investors are, so investors essentially are changing their focus in a way to that space. That's another factor that is probably driving it.
Okay, so let's look at some of the earnings that we've seen play out now. Starting with the telco space and Airtel Africa, we've seen revenues up around 13% and profit after tax also to the tune of around 25%. What's your take on what we're seeing play out? To keep in mind, this is the first quarter for Airtel.
Yeah, so it's a healthy result. Growth on the major items of the financials, and what's part of the one major factor is that even the customer base is also growing, as well as the average revenue per unit is also growing. So that's especially in terms of the growth in the customer base. So that speaks to the increased level of penetration in the country. And of course, because we also have a teeming population that is becoming more used to the global space. So whether in terms of mobile, in terms of data, revenues are always consumers are always making transactions or at least patronizing the telcos. So that's a major boost for the telcos. And of course, so several companies are still using the hybrid system. So that also drives demand for data and other forms of entertainment, YouTube and so on, that youths are using on the phone.
Yeah, because the mobile money also presents quite a lot of opportunities for this segment here. And I would like to get your take on the sentiments we've seen recently on the telco stocks. We saw investors exiting positions on MTN just a couple of days ago. Are we seeing the same today?
So essentially, the mobile money is it's a major opportunity, because that's another line of business that was hitherto non-existent for the telcos. So that's a line of business that is income-generating business that is going to be coming on stream on their books in more stronger that will be more prominent in their financials going forward. So that's something that will actually drive interest in that space in terms of their financials and in terms of their cash generating abilities. In terms of preference, MTN, Airtel, these are a lot of things. So like Airtel released results that are quite interesting given the level of challenging environments that we're operating in. So that the results are good. Investors would have that as a plus for Airtel, and the fact that Airtel has a dual listing. So that's another major plus that investors would prefer Airtel over MTN.